Assalamualaikum warahmatullah guys. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Assalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Interesting topic today guys, and that is the absorption of the loss provision by the PSIA holders. So this is one of the evidence of resharing between the bank and the PSIA holder in the Islamic banking system based on the funding which is coming from the profit sharing investment account. So we can see that in the conventional bank, the bank uses the deposit fund to make loan, and we can see that the loss provision is charged to the bank rather than to the depositors, because it is the bank that carry the credit market and operational risk. Thus, the absorption of the loss provision is entirely taken up by the bank. But when we look at the Islamic banking business with the PSIA resharing system, we do see that there is loss provision absorbed by the PSIA, which is understandable and expected from the label given to the PSIA as a profit, as a resharing fund. And therefore, the PSIA should be absorbing some of the loss or some of the expected loss coming from the asset and investment. So we can see here that, again, I'm using the CIMB Bank example, which I picked randomly, and we can see that the same reporting format is evident in all Islamic bank in Malaysia. You can see here that earlier I was showing that the income derived from the investment of shareholders fund, so this is the component of the capital fund that is used in the PSIA system, but I was arguing that the use of capital fund over here, of which there is income derived from the use of the capital fund, I was saying earlier that it is basically another way to describe the proprietary trading of the Islamic bank, rather than investing the capital fund into the usual retail asset, which we commonly know, comprising of property financing, which is long-term, and vehicle finance and asset financing, as well as hire purchase and so on. But as I was saying earlier, that the use of capital fund here is mainly about proprietary trading rather than investing the capital fund as murabahah or as ijara or as tawarruk financing. Okay, that is one of my observation, which I would like to contest. Because there must be integrity when we look at the way how the financial statement were prepared. We want to see the note 24, whether or not the bank has exactly used the capital fund to finance the core banking, right? Rather than putting the capital fund into treasuries, into safer asset. If they were to commingle the capital fund with a pool fund, which is the PSIA coming from the customer, then we cannot escape looking at some of this capital fund to be allocated into the retail asset, which can be long-term asset and may not be liquid enough to qualify for HQLA. So that was my observation in the last video. But now when we look at the current topic, which is the absorption of loss provision by the PSIA holder, and we can see here that in note 25, allowances for losses on financing and advances and other loan, and that would be 141 million to be charged to both the PSIA profit, that is income derived from investment of depositors fund, and to be charged to the income derived from investment of shareholders fund under note 24 and note 23. But what we should be looking now is at the income derived from the investment of depositors fund, which is essentially the profit arising from the PSIA fund, and we see that there's a charge of the loss provision onto the income derived from the investment of PSIA fund, which imply that the PSIA holder is absorbing some of the loss provision, which is not happening in the conventional bank. Of course, in the conventional bank, we look at Citibank here, and in the Citibank is a conventional bank, and we can see that the revenue were reported as interest income, and then we have interest expense. This is the cost of deposit, and then we have net interest income, and then we got the income coming from the Islamic window. But what we see here, that the interest expense have been distributed much earlier, which is the cost of deposit, and therefore the remaining net income for the bank, which is 1.6 billion, is charged, right? It is charged, meaning that the allowance for loan advances and loss provision for loan advances and financing were charged to the net income of the bank, which is 1.6 billion. So this is totally opposite to the Islamic banking practices, where we can see here that the loan provision or the financing loss provision is charged first to the profit derived from the investment of the depositors fund, and we can see that after that we will be getting the total distributable income, which is 1.3 billion. So this is the income to be distributed to the bank and to the depositor, and you can see that the income attributable to the depositor, which constitute the cost of deposit, is equal to 741 million ringgit, right? So the cost of deposit, which is the income distributed to the depositor, is gotten after subtracting the financing loss provisioning. So meaning that the PSIA holder, they will charge the loss provision, which is opposite to what we see in the conventional bank. And of course, this is something that is expected, because the PSIA is a resharing contract, and we expect the PSIA holder is to carry some risk or to share some risk with the bank, and the sharing of the risk is in the form of absorbing some of the loss provision of 141 million. So this 141 million is basically shared between the bank and the PSIA holder. So this is basically how we see the resharing taking place between the bank and the PSIA holder. But the main point here is to see that if there is a resharing between the two parties, especially the PSIA holder is taking the risk of their investment, and by virtue of absorbing the loss provision, so it should imply that the risk taken by the PSIA holder should be compensated with a higher return relative to the conventional bank depositor, because the conventional bank depositors, they were basically contracted based on riba, based on interest that guarantees the deposit and guarantees the interest income, and therefore they expect to basically receive a lower return than the PSIA fund that is supposed to be an equity fund, not protected, capital there's no capital protection, and there is no guarantee on the profit, but then what we see in the opposite is that the PSIA holder were not compensated much for the risk that they have taken. The risk that they have taken is the sharing of the loss provision, and when they get into this sharing of loss provision, they should be compensated for the risk taken. But then we can see this is not happening, because the return from the PSIA holder is always low and equivalent to the loan deposit. It is similar to the conventional deposit rate. Okay guys, so we'll stop here. We can further look at some of the issue coming from this observation. Thank you for your time. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.